let's go ahead and bring up my newsletter. I got an email from a supporter that almost broke my heart. I immediately came to my senses. I had the following two paragraphs in my Politics Done Right newsletter, not the Substack newsletter, the Politics Done Right newsletter, that I believe elicited the email. This is what I said in that newsletter. The year ahead is enormous. If we live up to our humanity, it will work out well. I had some other stuff that I'm not going to repeat here, but then I said, each of us has the power to incentivize goodness and humaneness with our acts. We need to live up to the expectations of those who need us at each other's throats. Let's use this holiday season to reevaluate ourselves and give others a place to land to do good. That act will let the country live up to its claimed values. You know, we claim to be the bastion on the hill. We claim to be fair. We claim to be a democracy. We claim all these things. Of course, none of it is really absolutely true. We know that when the Constitution was written, it wasn't written for most of us. It wasn't written for women at all. And it wasn't written, of course, for people of color of any type, whether indigenous or otherwise. And we've progressively moved forward. So, I mean, that's why I said, let's start living up to the values we claim to have. But anyway, the person who wrote me said, I have all but given up on humanity in sort of a dark way. Given what we are living through, this is still the article I'm reading now. Given what we're living through, it is not hard to understand why many people feel that way. But he has not just checking out. He was just not checking out. That email was likely a message to someone he felt comfortable with, giving him reason to stay checked in and engaged. I see that as my purpose and the purpose of many of us who have a platform to help navigate a system that can fluctuate between too sterile for humanity, inhumanely cruel, and sometimes surprisingly supportive. My response, of course, was not to give up. Farid Zakaria had two historians on his show this Sunday that gave me hope while may scare many. In the 1860s, we had the Civil War. It was brother against brother. We had people were up in arms about, now they want to say it was a war based on states' rights. That's BS. It was a war for those who wanted slavery and those who didn't. That's what the Civil War is about. Don't let anybody change that reality. So that the chasm in the country at that time was huge. Huge. I mean, families were split, just like we have families split right now between Trumpists and otherwise. Families were split. So we've been there. Then we jumped to the 1960s, right? In this one decade, JFK murdered, assassinated. MLK murdered, assassinated. Malcolm X murdered, assassinated. Bobby Kennedy murdered, assassinated. If you were living then, you would want to know in that decade, how can America, this supposed bastion of democracy, this bastion of sanity, how could all of that happen? When I think about it, I was born in the 60s, okay? And when I think about the amount of stuff that happened in the 60s, I'm trying to think about how people would think about it if we had a president assassinated, one of the major civil rights leaders assassinated, a secretary of state, not secretary of state, a former attorney general assassinated, a presidential candidate, and another civil rights leader that was taken hold. How would we, if that happened today, compared to what's happening now, we would be like, wow, it's the end of the world. But that happened in the 60s. Not to speak about Kent State, where the National Guards killed students. Not to speak about the Democratic Convention, where they cracked skulls like crazy. All of this in the 60s. Remember, we look at it today and it's like, oh, this is crazy. They had an attack on the Capitol. Hey, the one thing that never happened before was the attack on the Capitol. but we could say we had an attack on the Capitol. In those days, we had the assassination of the likely next president of the United States, and we also had the assassination of a president of the United States. So let's put things into perspective here. So let me continue reading that part, okay? In the 1960s, JFK, MLK, Malcolm X, Bobby Kennedy were assassinated. Riots and polarization were high. Understand, none of this was ever started by the masses in the aggregate. None of it. And many plutocrats have always profited from the turmoil. You have all those assassinations, you got all those, you have the place blowing up. The plutocrats are ready there to rebuild, sell the cement, sell the rocks, sell everything, sell the guns. They are there. They are there. The plutocrats profit going up. When the cops are blowing crap up, they're there to refurnish. When we're blowing countries up, they're there to sell the bombs. The plutocrats always make a profit. But they can only do that, right? We can only go into Iraq, Afghanistan, and all these other places we go into if the people who themselves don't want war go out and say, that's not what we want. But if we're at each other's throats, we can't see anything. We look at everything through the lens of our ideological following, which actually is a silly lens because ideologically, except for things like church and abortion, most Americans want the same thing. So when you go ahead and allow that polarization, you are playing directly into the plutocrats so that they can take advantage not of those damn liberals, but also those conservatives. And that is why I preach what I preach. If I go ahead and kick West and CSAC and all these right-wingers out of this stuff and say, you don't think like us, they win. They win. Because we stay at each other's throat, and then they can continue doing everything because they'll have West defending their right flank, and they'll have Rudnin defending their left. Well, not Rudnin. Rudnin is a lefty. We're talking. They'll have the centrists defending their left flank. That's how it works, people. So what I put as my last paragraph of that little sub post is the following: we still have avenues to communicate with each other. Here's one. Here is one. Here is one. Politics done right. So remember, share it. Share it. Let people hear the story. Let people understand what's going on. We still have avenues to communicate with each other. It is incumbent on us not to give up our brothers and sisters' humanity. Those who profit from the chaos need to factionalize us. It is incumbent on those who see the big picture to continue the engagement. Otherwise, those dependent on our confused state will profit. I mean, I hope, I sent that out to probably 6,000-7,000 people today. I hope people take heed on that, because that is the game.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.